Oh, no. Can you hear me? Is my mic working? Okay. In case anybody hasn't seen it yet, but I'm gonna share the we were on NETV news last night in Kearney. I'll share the link there about the Museum Property Act. That was very exciting.
Hi.
We're just waiting for Becky and Chris to join us. Oh, there's Becky.
Before we get started, I'm Pat and I'm a volunteer at the Dorchester-Saline County Museum. And I have a question. We have a lot of scratches on our glass countertops. And so the internet said use soda. Well, the only thing soda did was get the dirt out of the scratches. So it didn't really help. Anybody else have some good idea what works? This is the group I'm coming to that would know the answer, because when I went to the meeting, they said everybody that talks says we clean. You know, we start at the bottom and we do everything at the museum. So I need help.
I missed some of it. You're trying to get scratches out of a glass case?
Yeah, on the top of our countertops, we have a lot of, cupboards that, well, I don't know what they are, but cupboards, and then they have glass on the front. Well, on the top, everybody puts their hands on it. You can look down in it. There's scratches and dirt, and they are old.
Well, welcome to the group. I think we all have glass cases that have lots of scratches. Has anybody been able to figure out how to clean or buff? I don't know, unless your glass person in town or locally has some kind of buffing equipment that would take the scratches out. I think it's patina. Be proud of it.
Well worn.
Yeah, I don't know if we have an answer.
Okay, maybe
Sorry
just
about that, but you're in good company.
So I guess getting rid of it, they don't need to look like they're brand new because they aren't brand new.
Nope. Nope. It's even hard in plexi. It just, I think it is what it is.
That's worse on plexi, on the plastic, if it's an old plastic. At
Yep.
least the glass looks better than what the plexi would do. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome, I think. Well, welcome everybody. Chris and I had just a little excitement getting on, but we are good. And I think we're ready to start. Welcome to the Museum Property Act session. And at this point, I want to introduce the committee that's been working on this since, late spring, early summer. To my left is Karen Keir. She's part of the NMA board, marketing and communications, and has worked in the museum for several years, museum field, and knows a lot about property and doing this piece. Linda Endersby, to my left, right, you're right. She's part of the State Historical Society. No, History Nebraska, I apologize. And is back to Nebraska, but has worked on legislation for museums in other states and has been good to work with. And then Chris Hochstetler down and over. He's the director of Stir Museum and on the NMA board, and rubs elbows with people in the legislature and has gotten us pretty far and where we're at with his communication. So we are happy to have him, and I just keep prodding people. So I think Chris has put together a PowerPoint presentation for the four of us to kind of walk you through what we've done and kind of what the process has been and how you can help us.
I'm gonna see if I can make this a slideshow view so it takes all our stuff out of there. And then maybe one of you could share or let me know, do you just see the slides?
Yes.
Okay. Full screen and everything?
Yep.
Okay. So, Becky, I believe you're up first then.
I am. Can you click the, yes. So there's our agenda and how we've broken it down for people. And so I'm going to start with just kind of what we've been dealing with since about 1993, 96. I do think Michael Smith did write to the legislature some questions and didn't really get anything resolved or answered according to what we as the museum field in Nebraska would like. So basically, here's what we've been working with. If we have an artifact that we would like to deaccession, that we have in our collection, we can't just, if we don't know where it came from, or if it's been on loan and we don't have a lot of current information on who loaned it, we have to put in the newspaper what it is, any information that we have with it, description, any names, addresses, social security, kind of what is it when somebody gets captured, name, rank, and serial number. You put it in the newspaper that the local newspaper the museum is in, and then if you do have a name and that person lives somewhere else, you have to put it in the newspaper where they're from for 3 consecutive weeks. That has been very expensive. And I'm not sure, is there anybody on the call who has done that? Nope. Linda, did you ever encounter anyone that actually went through the process?
We did do the process in Missouri. I went through the process multiple times. The most difficult ones, we were in central Missouri. The most difficult ones were the ones that had connection to St. Louis or Kansas City, because doing the newspapers, we're talking thousands of dollars to do this multiple notification for each item. So there were ones we held off on precisely because of the cost of the newspapers.
So how did it overall, did it work?
It did. We were able to go through and obtain title to multiple things. I will say over the course of 5 years that I was working on this, we did end up having to return one item that it was a loss to our collection. It was an exceptional piece, but they were able to prove it had belonged to an organization, and they were able to prove that they were still that organization and that it did belong to them and it had been on loan. So we did lose a piece. However, overall, it cleared up so much in our collection for us to be able to use with no problem. We did not do deaccessioning at that time because that was the harder piece at that time.
Yeah.
But we did obtain title to multiple items that we were then able to do whatever we wanted with. And it worked fairly smoothly with the exception of the cost.
Yeah, see, and I think I know in the museums I've worked in, that's been the barrier. You know, and now newspapers aren't the communication tool that a lot of people use. So, so that's what we're supposed to do now. After notification has been published for those 3 weeks, now we have to wait 3 years. We give people 3 years to come to us. And like Linda said, they have to have the documentation that it does belong to them. If they don't have the proper documentation, they can't claim it. And in some instances, it's been years. And the initial donor, person who left it at the gate or loaned it, may be deceased, and so the family has to have the proper documentation. Let's see, after notification, and so as we hold on to these pieces, damages could happen to those pieces. Not that we mean to, but things happen. And so once they tell us that it does belong to them, they can claim, damages because we've damaged their piece of property. And that can go on for up to 3 years as well. And I'm only talking about the things that we want to change. There's other things in these documents, but these are the pieces we want to change. And then also action can be brought against the museum to recover property on loan for 7 years. So if it's a donor or someone who left it, and then you find out who it is and they can properly tell you that it was theirs, you only have to wait 3 years. But if someone has loaned it to the museum, they get 7 years to come back and claim it. And that's a long time. And then in our statutes right now, it says that we only have to keep written records on our property for 3 years, which makes no sense. Because how are we gonna know that something's been here for 7 if we only keep them for 3? And so we want to change that as well. So that's kind of our current state of what we need to do with museum property that is unclaimed. We don't know what to do with. Any questions? Or comments? All right, Karen?
So, what we want to change and what we want the statute to say is, we want to add, a public notice as well as online notices to publishing it in the newspaper. These modes of communication will significantly change, and give the options that we need to reflect a more modernized approach to communicating with our donors and our community. Museums will have a variety of options to choose from. You can either post it online, either through social media, through your website. If a small museum doesn't have have social media or a website, this is where the Nebraska Museums Association can help them out. We do have that, and we've been talking about how the Nebraska Museums Association can help with that as well. And then posting in a public area of the museum, as well as still having the option of posting in a newspaper. But we think that having these variety of options is important because so many of the small museums or small towns throughout Nebraska no longer have the option of newspapers. So many newspapers in small towns have shut down, and it's not just the cost. I mean, cost is astronomical to post new newspapers, but a lot of the small towns don't have newspapers anymore. So we need to have options for them to have other options to post on them. It'll still have to be posted for 3 consecutive weeks. That won't change. And then the time period will also change. It'll change from from that 7 years plus 3 years to 1 year. It'll relieve that cost burden for storage and having to maintain that. We feel that this change is important because digital media moves a lot faster, and 1 year is sufficient. We'll also create the same time frame for liability. It'll change from 3 years to 1 year from the contact or notice that these things are posted either online, publicly in a area in the museum, or through the newspaper. And then finally, we'll increase how long those records are kept from 3 years to 25 years. That's more in line with public professional standards. And it also compares exactly to the other another section of the bill that already is there. And most retention schedules say that deaccession records are kept permanently anyways. So just having them for 25 years, it makes sense on a professional level, museum professional level, that you keep those kinds of records. Does anybody have any questions for me or for us about the changes that we're making? All right.
Thank you, Karen. I was having to move my camera around here so that I can actually see what I'm looking at here on the slide, or move my screen of all the people who are on the call around so I can see what I'm looking at. My name is Chris. I'm with Stewart Museum, and my portion of this presentation is to talk about the process to update the statute. And I want to make really clear that this is a fairly complex process. Some of you may know it, some of you might not know what the process is, but at any given time, this can really get derailed along the way, whether it's some, bad press that gets people calling their senators, or whether it's, a senator somewhere in the committee hearing process, or group of senators decide that this is not something they want to tackle this year. It can pretty much be derailed. So we'll be watching this thing all along the way and hopefully keeping everyone informed as to how it's going. And I know that there's a great slide here on how you can help as well. But so the first step, starting up here in the corner with the locate a legislator to sponsor the legislation, we were able to do that. We solicited Senator Ray Aguilar, who's the senator for the district that covers a lot of Hall County here in Grand Island. He is a conservative senator. This bill doesn't have any implications to the budget, so it's fairly benign as far as that goes. But you never know how that is going to go. So Senator Aguilar introduced this, and it was co-sponsored by Senator Lippincott as well. So we're very grateful to them for bringing that bill forward. The next step for us, we've already checked the block on that one too. The committee here worked with the legislative aides as well as the bill writers for Senator Aguilar to make sure that we could get the wording the way that we wanted it, and make sure that we focused on those areas that needed to be corrected, just to bring us in line with the ability to conduct sound collection management that is in keeping with the standards that are published by the American Alliance of Museums, the AAM. So that was done, and very, very grateful for colleagues here on this call who helped us through that process to make sure that that language was good. The bill was introduced at the beginning of the session. We've already checked that block on January 4th, 2024. It was assigned a bill number LB 926. And it has also been assigned to a review committee. It has been, and that was happened just recently on January 8th. It was assigned to the General Affairs Committee. And that review committee will determine if that bill will advance to one of the 14 standing committees for hearings. There has been a hearing that has been set for this review committee, and I believe that is February 12th. Is it at 1 o'clock? I think either 1 or 1:30. Let me look at my calendar here. I've got it on mine at 1, but that doesn't mean 1 p.m. But that doesn't mean it could be 1:30. The best way to find out about these hearings is go to the Nebraska.gov site, the legislative site, and you can just, or even Google LB 926 Nebraska in your Google search bar, and it will bring it right up, and you can see the whole hearing schedule, and it'll be focused on LB 926, so you don't have to necessarily look at other things. Plus, it gives you kind of a nifty little way of making some online comments and submitting that to the committee, who will review those comments. So we encourage that you all do that, although I'm getting ahead of myself on this slide. So we know that a hearing has been set for the review committee. That committee will then vote to send the bill to general file with or without amendments. That's the standing committee. They could indefinitely postpone the bill and say, yeah, we're not going to do anything with this. We're just going to postpone it indefinitely. And then it would require that we go right back to the beginning of the process and find somebody to spin that up again. Or they could just decide, yeah, we're not going to take any action at all. And once again, we would have to restart the process. So there's a continuation of the process here. Once it goes to the general file or the full legislature, there would also be debates where all of the bills that have sent to the General Assembly will be debated. If it makes it through that debate, it goes to a process that's called enrollment and review, where all of the amendments that may have came up during the general file to the bill will be incorporated into that language. And it will be kind of checked, almost like going back to school, to make sure that the grammar and the reading of it is fine. And then it will go to a process that is called select file, which is the second time that it will meet the full legislature for debate, another opportunity for amendment or postponement, or to be killed. If it's killed, we don't want it to be killed, because that's pretty much the death of it. And then if it makes it through that process, it goes to what's called a final reading, which means all of those senators have to sit in the chamber, and every single bill that they are deciding to pass or have made it this far must be read aloud in its entirety. If you can imagine the boringness of that session, before it can actually be voted on and passed to go to update and to go to the governor's desk for signature to be enacted. Now, we have talked to the governor, and the governor has said that it makes it to his desk, he will sign it for what that's worth. So, it's a long process. We're still on the front side of that, but the bill is written well. It's got some support. And so we're excited about that, because this is the farthest I think we've probably ever gotten. Karen could probably validate that for us. But this is the farthest we've gotten. So we've got a long way to go. So it'd be nice for you all to watch the progress on nebraska.gov. Go ahead, Becky.
I just wanted to add that when we submitted the first draft, it came back, and the only thing that they changed that we hadn't changed back was that they wanted to start this as soon as the bill was passed. It would have been, from that point on, nothing that we had received in the past would qualify. And so we asked them to take that out, because most of our problems, are artifacts we already have and have had for a long time. So I don't know if that would come back, where they would say, oh, well, just from now on. And I guess if it ends up that way, I guess it's better than nothing, but it's not helping us with the items that we already have to deal with.
Yeah, in that case, it would only help us into the future. And
Mhm.
as we know, many museums are beleaguered with items that they can't deaccession now, because honestly, the way that the law is currently written for some community museums and historical societies, collecting agencies, they simply can't comply with the act the way that it's written now. So they just don't. So you just keep stacking stuff in the corner and building new buildings, I guess, which is not an answer for sound collection management. So Linda, I believe you're next.
Yes, and I apologize. Quality of this graphic is not as good as I would have liked, but there was other legislation this week about the Open Records Act, which affects archives, that we were scrambling trying to respond to this week as well. But I've worked in other states, and I've used museum property acts in other states. So it became kind of a research thing on my part to figure out who was doing what. And there are only a few things that are consistent. Most of them, like Nebraska, did theirs in the 1990s. There was a big museum field push. So almost all of the 46 states that have this did theirs in the 1990s. From that point, they vary widely. What's shown here is actually how long that you have to have possession of the object before you can start this process. And I will say the vast majority of them are 7 years. Although when we feel bad, I worked in Michigan and it was 35 years there. So it can be worse. I will say there's only a few states where it's 3 years or less. So that would be really great to have. So Nebraska would sort of be ahead of the game if we can get this passed. One other thing is that there are a number of other states who are also thinking about this. I know Pennsylvania actually submitted something their last legislative session, and it did not pass, but it really had nothing to do with that bill. They've reintroduced it again this year. Iowa has a draft. So we're not the only ones who are working on this. There's a handful of other states. However, Nebraska is sort of ahead of the game because if we can get this passed, even we would be one of only 3 states that is really fully in line with the whole, we don't do newspapers anymore, we do social media. Florida recently changed theirs. However, it says newspaper and website. Minnesota recently changed theirs, and they do have that you can put on the websites. But we're sort of, if we can get this through, we will be ahead of the game. We will be sort of have moved this law into the 21st century before almost any other state, which I think is amazing. Because everyone knows that the world is different than it was in the 1990s. And so if we can get this through, we can sort of be an example. I have people I know in several other states who are really curious to hear about our process, whether it succeeds or fails and how it worked. Because like I said, a number of other states are working on this as well. But I think it's amazing that NMA has gotten this far at this point.
So Becky, were you or I going to do this one? This slide?
Go for it.
Okay, so just sharing how you can help now is first, there's a link there, and I could copy that into here. Let me try to copy that into the chat if I can. Where's my chat?
Yeah, because now I think it's time for the rest of us.
Yeah,
Chime in.
it is. And how come I cannot see my chat? Is everybody else seeing their chat on there?
I don't.
Oh, maybe it's the way we've got the call set up so that there's no, that's okay.
Actually, I can see the chat. Let me see.
Can you I don't know if you can.
I can't copy it because I don't have the full.
Yeah.
Actually, I have the one that you sent. I can pull up the one that you sent.
Yeah, I can
here.
get it.
Okay.
Just give me a second here.
Okay. Thanks, Karen. So it'd be nice if we could get that in people's chat so they can remember it.
Yep, let me just pull up the.
I'm going to go ahead and make sure that slideshow again is showing so that you can see that. So the first thing that I guess how you can help is make sure that you go on that link and that you read through the bill. Why would you want to do this? Because to promote the bill, you need to have read it, because people will ask you questions. They'll be like, well, what's it actually going to change? You know, and the bill you can see in its markup style so that you can see exactly what changes. And it would be good for you in your discussions to know what that is. The next thing that you can do is make sure, I would start with colleagues, board of directors or trustees, anybody who is close to you, as well as close to museums. You would want to make sure that you inform them of this and to let them know. You can send them the links too to support the bill and answer their questions. You know, start with people close to you. Use social media. If anybody on the call is on social media, NMA is posting social media posts about the bill. So if you're not one of these that wants to construct your own post, you could probably just go on and share something that the NMA has posted, which will help it go viral, so to speak, and reach many. The other thing that you can do is you can watch that testimony schedule, and those hearings are generally open to the public. So you could go and they do allot time. If people are in the space to make remarks, or you can contact and get on to be scheduled to give testimony. We can facilitate that at NMA, because we will be looking for a slate of folks who would go to testify on behalf of this bill. We can't have just museum professionals there to testify, because, you know, everyone is going to assume that we want the bill to pass. It would be nice to have maybe trustees, a good or board members, lay people, a good cross-section from the state as well. Not everybody from Grand Island, not everybody from Omaha and Lincoln, but people from western, northern Nebraska, far northwest, far northeast, southern Nebraska. You can also contact your state senator. This is something that is so important. To find your state senator, I put the link there. You click on that link, you can find your state senator, and you can actually send a message and ask your state senator, please support LB 926, changes to the Museum Property Act. And speak from your experience and speak from your soul. You know, canned messages do okay, but nothing replaces a message directly from you that has your thoughts, your encouragement to say, you know, Senator Aguilar, I work in a museum. This is a problem for us. You could really throw us a life preserver by supporting this, because it's going to allow us to preserve history, come into line with American Alliance of Museum professional standards regarding care of collection. And we desperately need this. Something to that nature would go a long way with your state senator. And then finally, I would add that it will do us absolutely no good if we pass this legislation, or when we pass this legislation, if museums do not comply with it. Because honestly, our perception right now at the NMA, right, wrong, or indifferent, could be a little clouded, although we don't get to everybody. But our perception right now is that museums across the state are not complying with the current law, predominantly because they can't. You know, it's not a functional law. Well, as the law becomes functional, it will be incumbent upon us to make sure that we are falling into line, and that our museums are following policies and procedures that will help us comply with the law. So we want to make sure that that's kind of the last step in this. And I believe that is the last slide for us, Becky, and I know that we stand ready to take questions.
Unfortunately, when it was first rolled out, Senator Aguilar is very pro Hall County. And so his bills, he really liked to link to the organizations he's trying to support. And so it came out as a store museum, project. It is not. It is a Nebraska Museum Association project. So just to clarify that, if any of you heard some of his comments, he wants to get reelected, and he's a great guy. But it is Nebraska Museums.
Okay. Karen Wagner, do you have a question? No.
Do any of you have some good relationships with your senators where it would be very easy to shoot an email or pick up the phone? Maybe you want a better relationship with your senators?
Janet Hughes is my representative in our area, and I contact her regularly, so that would be easy for me to do.
Ah, yay, Pat, thank you.
This is Kevin from Gibbon. Is there a way for you to, and I put it in the chat, a way for you to send the slide deck to us?
So I responded to you, Kevin, in the chat.
Okay,
So this recording, as well as a copy of the slide deck and copy of the press release and some bullet points about the about the bill and the changes, will all be posted on the NMA website for the monthly musings. There's a link there in the chat as well. So we'll put up as many resources as we possibly can. And it'll all be on the monthly musings NMA website.
I will say that all of the board members of the Nebraska Museum Association, and there's what, 17, Karen, 18, something like that. Everyone is supporting this. And so it's already been vetted, I guess, with a group of museums across the state. So if you want to talk to your representative, you can look on the NMA website and see the people that are in your region. If you want to actually talk to someone besides the four of us, that is fine.
And also the way to get this bill across the line, obviously, with any bill, is that contact with the senators, the positive contact to say, please support this. The more they hear that, and there's a nice little feature on when you go to LB 926 on nebraska.gov, where you can actually send electronic comments to the committee, and you can start to do that right now. And I would encourage everybody to do that, because that will influence that committee process along to get it to move along a little bit. If they don't hear anything, they'll figure that nobody cares about it, and that it's, it could be a throwaway if the schedule gets full, for example, because they will try to make space in these debates and on this schedule to get rid of bills. And there are a lot of benign bills that benign to the budget bills that are great bills for our state. They get kicked to the curb just because there's no time. They run out of time to talk about. So they want to talk about the bills that people are talking about. So we've got to get some buzz generated. The second thing that I would say, in closing, is that we can't, the NMA has a strong board, but this committee is pretty small. There's only 4 of us or so. And we can't monitor every second of this thing because we're also doing our museum stuff. And so if you do hear out there of some negative comments coming up, or we need to hear about it so that we can kind of get and run the defensive plays, so to speak, because we're dealing with people's emotions with this bill. And you all know that we're dealing with their memories, their emotions, and some of those emotions could be tied up in a box that they just left sitting on the step one night saying this was from grandma's attic, but they didn't leave any other information than that. And so now we have artifacts with no provenance, no backstory. We don't know who dropped it off, and we've been sitting on the things in our collections for years and years and years. But that person will probably be the first person to get spun up and say, well, why would they do that with the box that I dropped off with grandma's stuff? And if you start to hear those negative things crop up, then we need to make sure that we've got the heads up so that we can share our position about sound collection management.
Thank you very much, Chris, and you guys for all the hard work putting this together. I definitely think you're 110% correct. Is so many museums are not compliant with the current law as it is on the books, and I can't tell you how many of these organizations I talk with where oh, we were on a deaccession this, and we'll just take it out and throw it out. It's nice that they can, it's legitimizing the industry and these museums across the state of Nebraska. So you guys have just done so much great work. So thank you.
And I actually did have a comment on, for anybody who can't come to the hearings, they broadcast them over the web. You can watch the hearings. You can watch the floor debate. I will put the link in. It's a great resource. Honestly, I'm below the hearing rooms, and half the time I just watch on the television or on my computer screen because I don't always have time to go upstairs. So there is
Thank you
that
for-
link.
For dialing in, Karen. I could see Nebraska Capitol, but I couldn't see the rest of your title. So you're with the archives. That's
Yes,
awesome.
I am. And someday I won't be encased in plastic with the the HVAC renovations.
Okay, look forward to that.
Yeah, me too.
Well, and I do want to reiterate, when I've done advocacy with legislation at the state level before, a key thing is that your representative, and I guess Nebraska, your senator knows that somebody in their district is being affected, and is it for good or for bad? We had legislation introduced in Missouri that was about museum stuff in the same chapter as the Property Act, but not that. And it was basically about one museum, and all we had to do was go in, testify saying the way this has changed, it would put all of the county historical societies in all your districts out of compliance with the law immediately, and it never went anywhere. So I do want to stress what's already been said is call up your representative, say, hey, you may not have noticed this bill. This would really help us. We're in your district. We're your constituents. Those are the people they listen to, is the people who can vote. And that's the consistent thing about advocacy, is they will listen to you if you're in their district.
And when talking to people, and not just your senators, but people about this bill, a couple of keywords that we're trying to use is modernizing the bill, and that we're de-accessioning items, not getting rid of items, and that we're trying to tell the best possible Nebraska stories. So, it's important. I think a lot of times people, we forget that museums, we as museum professionals, we use a lot of jargon, and we have these really complex processes that other people don't understand. They think they really honestly think that it's okay just to drop a box off on our doorstep on the weekends, and that we'll be happy to have the surprise when we come to work on Monday. But I think it helps. This is a great learning opportunity too, to help people understand what it is we do and why it's important that we have these policies and procedures in place. So, seeing de-accession instead of getting rid of, and sometimes it's about transferring things to other museums to tell a better story, and that there is a cost to keeping things on a shelf for us, that archival boxes are expensive, HVAC systems are expensive, and space is at a premium. If we have 10 butter churns taking up space on our shelves, we don't have room to tell all those great diverse stories about Nebraska. And we can't do that if our space is taken up by all these objects that we're just storing. So I'd love to hear how this is going to impact some other people. Maybe, I don't know, does anybody have any horror stories they'd like to share, or like how they think this is going to help them manage their collections better? We'd love to have some feedback. Everybody's so quiet.
Well, and I do want to, go ahead.
Oh no, that's okay, Lynn. You can go. I'll wait.
Well, but Karen's right. We want feedback first. So go.
Okay. Yeah, I was just gonna say, when you talk about sort of not moving forward with cleaning up, as I like to call it, our collections, because of the way that the law is currently written, that's where we're sitting right now with Elkhorn Valley Museum, is just that there are things that don't fit within our scope, or we get magical boxes that show up outside of our door too, that it's kind of, you feel almost like your hands are tied to a point, because the avenues aren't really there to help. Yeah, I feel like to help us kind of tell those stories, and also I think it's great that it's an opportunity to sort of call in and do some public education about those inner workings of museums that seem so mysterious. So yeah, so thank you guys for your work. So thanks, it'll be great for us.
I think this is Kevin. I think in our case, we're all amateurs on our board, and we have no professionals in our organization. I think one thing need to make sure clarify, and I'll double check looking at the bill, is whether or not this applies to loans or whether it applies to unfettered donations, and maybe what the differences are between those. That may be an area of confusion all the way around for some folks, I think. So
there are two sections. There's one section about both abandoned property or things that don't have clear title, and then there's also a section about loans. And when we post the bill, or if you go and read the bill, it's pretty clearly defined. So I think when you read the bill, you'll have a better understanding.
Well, and a key piece is whether it's found in collection or doorstop drop or a long-term loan, the notice process that is changing will be the same for all of them. So whether it's any of that, the notice process will be, you can do newspaper or your website or post in your museum. And so that notice piece, which has been really problematic, will be eased for either of those situations.
And with some things that may be in your collection for a long time, the current staff may not know that it was a loan or a drop-off or donated, and the paperwork was never done or was not filed properly. And so it could be any of those. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm on this committee, but I'm not on the NMA board, so I don't want to speak for the NMA board, but I think perhaps if and when this passes, there might be an opportunity for some education to help some people, particularly these people, if they're all volunteer or whatever. Some of us might be able to have sessions where we can sort of help you work through some things if this is passed, because as Chris said, if it's passed, we want to get everybody to understand it and use it so that we're sort of all doing the best that we can.
You know, we talked about having a session at the conference in April 8th and 9th, but we weren't sure where we would be in the process of this by then. So it'll have to be afterwards. So, yeah.
Well, and another thing that Karen said, to make the point of, this bill isn't so that we can just throw stuff away. That's not the point. I mean, at History Nebraska, we've done deaccessioning, and for a lot of it, the vast majority of it, our first thing is to find out whether another institution in the States could use it. And, you know, if it's something specifically related to, for example, Gibbon, that we might not be able to display, then maybe it's better if it's at Gibbon, where you can tell the stories better and display it better. So it's not about us throwing the stuff away. It's about us focusing the resources on what each of us should be focusing on. I think is part of it.
I also just wanted to mention that at last year's conference, Becky did a really nice presentation on deaccessioning 101. And the slide deck, the PowerPoint presentation is available on the NMA website as well. So if you go to past conferences, that is available there. So So you can
Good.
check that out.
Thank you.
Another question from Kevin. Are you doing your own lobbying on this thing, or are you getting involved with some of the regular cadre of lobbyists that are down in Lincoln?
I was told, I have connections with the Hastings Museum, and when that staff was, well, one of their staff members is on the board, and they're a city museum, and so they got to talking to the Hastings city attorney, and they have a lobbyist on their staff. And so that person was given the information and was supposed to lobby for the Hastings Museum, but then in turn for all of us. So I need to double check and see how that's going.
Yeah, NMA, with its status, can't just specifically go out and hire a lobbyist because we're not profits. I
Yeah.
say we, again, I'm not on the NMA board, but
Would you
I've
like
been
to
on
be,
boards
Linda?
I've been on the boards of 2 other SMAs, so.
But it's also, as you all might know, it's a very costly proposition to hire a professional lobbyist to do these things. And also I go back to the power of communication with the state legislatures belongs to the people. And we have such good, rich mechanisms to do that, whether it's just click and send a note or, make a phone call or whatever the case may be. All of that is what's going to make the difference. We've done some good press work so far, I think. There was an article on Nebraska television, a live television broadcast about the bill yesterday. There's been some press out there already. I know that NMA board members around the state are also sending that press release out to get some local coverage. But once again, nothing can replace all of us getting with our colleagues, getting with our people in our local community, fellow board members, whatever the case may be, and saying, hey, we need to get the word out about this bill. That's what's going to make all the difference.
Well, we're coming up on the hour. Does anyone have anything else they want to share or ask? I appreciate Kevin and Libby and Micah kind of adding to the conversation. Is there anything else anybody wants to add? Well, thank you for taking your time to join us. This is kind of our first attempt at getting the word out, and we'll be doing some more work. But if you could join us in getting that to your senator, we would be forever grateful. Thank you again for your time. Anything else, Karen, Linda, Chris?
Nope, I just want to remind everybody that next week's monthly musings will be on best practices for non-profit boards, hosted by Micah on February 23rd at 10:30.
All right. Hope to see you then. Thanks, everybody.